Aloha, everyone, and welcome to a new Tinkers Academy video. This is a Tinkers Chat. I've got Ian Mitchell and Philipp von Holtzendorff on the line, and we've got a great lineup of discussion topics for you today. I just want to introduce these two gentlemen for anyone who doesn't or hasn't heard of them before. Ian Mitchell is with Wizard Sciences, and he is one of the more profound C60 scientists out there. It's got three, I believe, right? Three different patents to your name regarding C60, and you're also the father of the first P53 knockout rat study to validate the body study that actually launched the C60 supplement phenomena. Plus, you also have done multiple dog studies on C60, and it's just this guy knows C60, and he's also an incredible biohacker wizard. And then, yeah, and then also we've got Philipp von Holtzendorff on the line, and he is with the Leela Labs, the Leela C60 Labs, and Leela Quantum Tech. The interesting thing about Philipp is he's a former cell phone industry executive, national tennis player, and turned entrepreneur. So there's some guys got some great background, but he's also a C60 entrepreneur and has multiple products out there that are C60 related, as well as in the quantum space as well. So, hey guys, welcome. Good morning.
Thanks for having us, Kay.
Philipp, how are you doing today?
Hey, Kay, thanks so much.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, I do want to point out one thing, and it's the beauty of Google. When I went to go pull your pictures for this slide, just to show what you two look like, I found a real interesting picture I wanted to share, and this is a picture of young Philipp that is out on Google. So this is the young Philipp.
There you go.
So
that is fantastic, man. That is great.
Isn't Google wonderful? Okay, so kids, I just want to say, it's a warning. So this is, if you look like this now and you start investing in crypto, you're going to get scruffy looking. So this is what crypto does to you.
That's awesome.
It's either that or teenagers. I think we all have teenagers, or actually mine's off to college now, but look what teenagers does to you. But we're all still looking pretty young because we all do C60. But yeah, that was pretty funny, Phil. This has got to be when you were working in telecom. Is that your LinkedIn photo?
Yeah, probably. I don't even know from which year that was, but it's quite some time ago. Yeah.
Anyway, that's Google for you. So anyway, for today's. I couldn't find one of you, Ian. I looked all over.
Thank God.
You have hidden yourself.
We'll do more research for next time.
Don't reach out to my mom, Kay. That's
all right. I love Google. Sometimes you find the wildest stuff out there. Okay, so hey, so the discussion topics today is we're going to talk about the latest research these two incredible minds are doing. Some of the new products that are coming out, some of the new projects they're working on, and any C60 stuff that comes up for anybody that's still interested in C60, although it's kind of weighing down last couple of years, and we've kind of moved off to different subjects. But because I'm actually really looking into all sorts of other things as well as C60 now. But so the last time we kind of chatted, Ian, you'd launched the resistor product. It was an ozone-based product, and then there was the Leela quantum jacket that was launched out there. But so what I'd like to do is just kind of open it up and just say, hey guys, what are you working on now? And start with either one of you, and let's just go from there. What do you want to talk about?
Philipp, you want to take this one first?
Sure, why not? So there are different fronts, obviously. One is the C60 side, and we're very happy with the product portfolio we have currently. So we're just optimizing, and one thing we don't have to dive into really much, but I want to mention it at least today, is that we're optimizing further our C60 in black seed oil capsules. It's a very unique product that some of you may already know of. It's the only one that contains astaxanthin, which we found to be extremely compatible and helpful in this mix. and we're actually working with Ian right now to improve this. So I think give it another 4 or 5 weeks, and we'll be ready to announce it. So there's not a whole lot of change, but it's just going to be even better quality, and I'm really looking forward to that. And also, for everybody, watching this from the US, Canada, the production will be here, so that's a nice thing. Yeah, and then we're having actually a lot of things in the pipeline right now on the quantum side for Leela Quantum Tech. I think probably some people are wondering about the jackets, and the jackets should be available within the next 30 to 45 days. They're pretty much almost ready with production, but we still have some scheduling to do to roll it out. That's a bigger issue. And I think definitely within the next 45 days, this will be live on the website, and people can then get it. And yeah, so that's exciting. And then we're working on new frequencies that we will launch. Actually, we have worked on them over the last 6 months. And there is the Forever Young frequency, which will release probably in the next 30 days. That one was developed by Zunia Fisher. It's one of the healers in our network, and I'll actually also post a video with her very soon. And then there's a very exciting one that Kay Elmer came up with. So that's your thing, Kay. So you jump in with whatever I may be missing, but it's so Kay actually did a lot of different things, and this one got me very excited because, and Ian may have a perspective on that too. It seems that testosterone levels in men nowadays are actually relatively low, and wherever you look at in terms of food, diet, and other behaviors here on Earth right now, it doesn't really support testosterone levels anymore. And testosterone levels, to get those up again, is quite tricky, actually. There are certain ways physically on what you can do other than sunning your balls, to quote Cliff High here. But you can take certain things, but then you run into the risk of possibly overdosing that or having other effects that you may not want. And so this idea of, I thought was amazing, to create a frequency card that contains the best possible nutrients and supplements you can take to actually boost your testosterone levels. And we got it then actually tested by Roman, and yeah, he is very excited about that, and he doesn't get so excited very fast, and he said this should have absolutely measurable effects. So this one will be live, I think, later today. That's exciting. And then we have another one which we call the DNA and Cell Protector, which basically, does what the title says, really, right? It is intended to protect your DNA and your cells, and from various influences, whether it's external substances that are potentially harmful or other outside forces. People are thinking about the vax currently, so that's definitely a consideration. We don't want to go much into that since this is a public video here, but people that got the vax, they're asking themselves, well, am I safe now? And they're hearing some bad things, so they're worried. And a lot of people that don't get the vax, they're very worried because now they have heard that actually mRNA and all of that, spike proteins, etc., can jump over to you, and we actually got some evidence in regards to that as well. So, and then there are certainly lots of other considerations in general where you want to protect your cells and your DNA, and that card will also be available later today. And yeah, we're very excited about this one. We actually tested extensively over the last 5 months with a lot of test persons, and actually around the globe, and not just in the US. And yeah, we're very excited about this one.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. Yeah, the testosterone booster. It originally started as one of the 5 components of the men's booster overall, except the men's booster is really for men that are like in their over 40. So, but I know that people younger than that are having specific issues with testosterone. And then one of my friends was like, he's in his same age as I am, in the late 50s, and he started getting shots. And so when he did that, I started researching like what was he doing to himself. And then it just wasn't a good idea, because once you have your body relying on a different substance, an actual injection of hormones, your body stops producing the hormones, right? And starts relying on the injections. And so I just thought that was a really bad idea. So I just took out the old original testosterone booster, and then hat tip off to Jack Newell, who he traded me. We did some frequency tradings. I got some more other substances, and I kind of upgraded it and made this. And I was pretty stoked that Roman really picked up on it. So I'm actually testing it now, everybody. So we'll let you know how it works out. I've actually got testosterone test kits, and testing the frequency out on myself, and we'll see what the results are. So I'm looking forward to that. So awesome.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
actually
guys,
a keyword to
one
this.
thing
Go ahead.
one thing I'll jump in on that is, and I wasn't planning on talking about testosterone, but having seen a couple of very aberrant jumps in people's testosterone levels when I was reviewing their blood work from a couple of the trials that I've been doing over the past 2.5 years, um, I I started looking at testosterone because their levels had been increasing, which was, for a guy, obviously a good thing. Because Philip, what you had alluded to is completely spot on. Just due to the preponderance of xenoestrogens and phytoestrogens, whether it's chemical compounds that mimic estrogen, or plant compounds like soy and things like the isoflavones and stuff like that that mimic estrogens, there can be some issues with that. But I did notice one of the stats that was really bizarre was that there was a big study done by the clinical endocrinology guys in like 2006 or 2007, and they had shown that since the 1980s, the average testosterone in males was dropping 1% per year. So at this point, a guy would have on average 40% lower testosterone than a guy would in 1980. And
Wow.
that's a pretty profound decrease.
Yeah, it's
Indeed.
yeah, that's everything that I'm reading as well. So I'm hoping this helps, because I know that I mean, every man I know, it's an issue, and we've been all that plastic packaging and all of that stuff had a very bad toll on us. So yeah, I'm hoping this helps. And so Ian, from a science wizard standpoint, I mean, what would be your solution other than injections for someone that wants to boost their testosterone? Because I take the supplements right now, and of course, I created this frequency set to kind of boost the actual physical supplements that I'm taking, and trying to see if it goes up. But what would you recommend for out there? Anyone out there?
I would take Uricoma longifolia, or also known as Tongkat Ali,
Yep,
or sometimes it's called long jack.
Yep.
And it's a root, right? Basically, it's a dried powdered root, but it's an aromatase inhibitor. So it doesn't actually trigger your body to produce more testosterone, because most people don't have an absence of testosterone. Their endocrine system's still producing some. Hormonally, they're not completely dysregulated. They're just, out of kilter, not turned off. So if you take an aromatase inhibitor, what happens is effectively it builds a dam in your system so that your body doesn't break down the testosterone as rapidly. So you end up with your own endogenous testosterone levels going higher just because you've dammed them up, and the breakdown isn't happening with the rapidity which it would have naturally if you just let the aromatase break it down and cycle it on. So the result of that is you end up with higher free testosterone levels.
Oh, okay. Yeah, actually, I captured the frequency of that in the booster, and along with a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, that's great. So okay, so you've got the new frequencies, and we're trying to test the testosterone now. Are you, Philip? I know that you go with the BESA Institute and IGAF. Are you going to have these other frequencies tested with those guys, and just like we did the other ones, or you did the other ones?
So the DNL and cell protection, this
Yeah.
one we've already tested. So we're done with this one. And the
Okay.
testosterone booster,
All right.
that is something, you're doing your test, and then we wanted to expand on that. So I think we'll do one, because I find this topic extremely fascinating, actually. And it seems to be something that can be measured relatively easily. So let's see what we can find out there. We
Okay.
do have more research planned, indeed, because that's really very close to my heart, because that's what we want to do, right? People, we've always said these energy products is amazing for people that can see energies and feel and sense them, and then you have so many people out there that can't do that, and they just want to see some science. So we want to continue to produce that, and there's actually a study in India planned
Okay.
with two doctors that have come across our products, and they found out that there are apparently beneficial results to kids and other people with that are autistic. And now these two doctors, they have about 35 new autistic kids that enroll into their program each month, and they're just really interested in setting up a real clinical study that would run, I think, 3 to 6 months. It's quite an undertaking, actually. And they want to work with official boards there in India. But for India, the positive thing is that India is very open in general as a country towards things that may not be mainstream, right?
Hmm.
So they already have support for that, and we'll start that study probably over the next 60 days. So that's exciting. Another study that we're actually in the planning stages of right now, there are actually two, and those will be in the US. One will be another dark field microscopy study. So we've done a lot of dark field microscopy already, but what we want to do now is take it a step further and really make it a very make it an even better study. Let's say it that way. I just will leave it at that. And then the last one that we are currently in the planning phases of is actually in regards to Lyme disease. That's also with a bunch of doctors of the functional medicine here in the US. And we found a way on how we can actually measure that really, really nicely in a visual way. And yeah, we're currently in the planning stages. So I think maybe in the next 45 to 60 days, that study can also begin. And it's the first phase of that is probably going to be 3 month, a 3 month time frame, and we'll certainly report out of those. But that's very exciting. It's a lot of work, but I think that's what we need to do.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean,
Hey, one quick shout out, guys. This is regarding the quantum block. Since we're all obviously tinkering with it these days and playing with frequencies, Philip, I wanted to let you know a friend of mine that I had turned on to it got one of the blocks, and he's been able to eat things that normally give him histamine reactions, where he'd break out in hives without breaking out. Which I gotta say, man, hats off.
yeah, I read that.
That is indeed fascinating.
Yeah, somebody reported that in the chat as well, that they had food allergies and that they put the food in their eye block and it nullified it or neutralized it. It's amazing. That's the thing about this. I don't know what I don't have a better word for it, but this phenomenon that just it does a lot of different things that you don't expect it to do, and that was definitely a really interesting one. And in fact, in my piloting, as I was mentioning earlier, before we started the recording, which I also worked with a young man that had autism, and primarily working with his father. And the thing that was very unique about this test was I was using the infinity block, but what was most interesting was that this young gentleman goes to a facility every day in which they work with him and they rate him. So he's been under clinical observation for years. And then every day they fill out this questionnaire on his behavior and they score him. And so there's been this long track record for this young gentleman on how he's doing. And so what was fascinating is that I started putting him in the Infinity block on Mondays. For the first time, he had positive scores. He'd always had negative scores on Mondays up until this moment. And as soon as he started going into the I block, he started having positive scores, and his two caretakers were reporting that his demeanor was much more positive on Mondays. And because you could see the history, and so that's what made that one very unique, because you don't really get that kind of feedback, on some of these trials. But here's someone who'd been observed for quite a long time and scored, and all of a sudden now all the new scores going forward are very different, and they're positive. And then he also started really coming out of his shell and things like that he hadn't done since for a year or so. So, yeah, I think this whole issue about autism and all of these other issues, food and everything, it's pretty amazing. So, I mean, Philip, you were mentioning something about the like Roman's take on autism. Is that something you could share in terms of just like the uniqueness of that condition? I think is fascinating. I don't know if you recall that
Yes.
earlier discussion, but
Yes.
that was real interesting, and why possibly that this works so well for autistic folks.
Yes, so the way he described it is that, someone that's autistic basically can't focus on this reality here. They're constantly pulled into these other realities that they're in, and the quantum energy, the pure quantum energy of the infinity block, certainly also of the quantum block, but even more so, he says, of the infinity block, is almost counterintuitive, because the infinity block is way stronger. He said that pulls them in here, and that gives them something to hold on to, if you will, and makes them be more in this reality, and feel themselves more, and this reality. And so for him, that wasn't a surprise at all that it worked so well what you did, which is kind of funny, right? For all of us, we're like, wow, this is amazing. And for Roman, it's like, yeah, I mean, this is exactly what I would have expected. So it's easy from that perspective. And yeah, and then, those things together also made me then think, okay, so now we're finding out these things. Now we really need to do a study. So when these Indians came along, I was just like, hey, this is just amazing. Let's do this study. Yeah. So there may be really something to it. And it's something we struggle with to explain what is the actual mechanism. Roman can define that for us from his energetic viewpoint, but if we talk to a mainstream scientist now, they would be like, okay, so just tell me how this works, right? And then we would start to struggle to explain exactly how it functions, right? What it does.
Yeah, no,
that is the difficulty.
You
can see downstream effects. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kay.
No, I was just going to say, I just don't think there's a language yet. That's because it's all about words and languages. It's like a foreign language where the guy tries to explain something to you and then says, I can't think of a word in your language for X, right? That's what I see this as. I just don't think there's a language yet that can explain this, and we don't have words yet that we could use. But yeah, there's something definitely happening. But I'm sorry, Ian, what were you going to say?
No, it's exactly that. I think it's akin to, and Philip and I have talked about this before, it's akin to people in, the 14 or 1500s trying to describe what we're doing with cell transmissions. They simply lack the vernacular. There isn't an adequate capacity to linguistically convey the concept. And part of that is, a lot of times the people who name things and come up with different concepts, they're either in the arts or in the sciences, which are, at their peak, sort of blended. Because anybody who's reached a certain degree of technical proficiency, when you push past that, it becomes more of an art than an actual science. And you're striving for elegance in what you do. And I think with regard to the quantum, since I've been working on it a lot for the past year with the Biocharge project and a couple of other projects, it's difficult because I wasn't able to test things directly. And it's the first time I've actually played with something where you can't run a standard analysis and get the standard responses. You actually have to look for downstream effects. You're dealing with a force that you haven't completely identified, and frankly, in a spectrum that we haven't actually identified, which is something that I think is a little different, because typically you think quantum and you're thinking, well, there's going to be some sort of EMF wave that I can calibrate, or some sort of gamma emission that I can look at. And in my lab, we've actually just started finding some gamma frequencies that we're noticing in that spectra. But it's difficult, because you start to look for it and go, well, okay, what are the precepts here? Well, people have done this before, where they tried to identify things that were happening, but they had no terminology for it. They didn't exactly know where they were. So you're relegated to doing exactly what we're doing collectively, all of us, looking for the tangible physical effects, doing dark field microscopy, saying, how does this affect the blood in real time? What are the actual results in your case? Looking at the testosterone levels. So we're looking for physical correlates, and then we're slowly starting to pull on the Gordian knot that is quantum, because everybody wrinkles their nose when you say quantum anything, and myself included, honestly, because it sounds like such a woo-woo marketing thing.
Yeah.
But there really isn't a more adequate way to describe it yet than to say, oh, it's some sort of little packeted, variation in energy or fluxing of fields. I really think we're all kind of still groping around in the dark. The interesting thing is we're all having our own personal, tangible experiences, and in my case, I'm having quantifiable lab data. And the same thing with some of the products for Leela. There's quantifiable lab data. I've looked at it. I've shown it to a lot of people because it's impressive. When you actually see that there is a physical manifestation over a matter of minutes, and it's statistically quantifiable. So that means it is happening. But it gets back to that whole being a true scientist. You have to approach it with the understanding that I'm not going to understand everything. If I do, I'm not really pushing the boundaries one iota. Because
Right.
we're trying to grow, right? I mean, that's the whole goal of, at least for me, that's the whole goal of this sort of
Oh yeah. Oh, did we lose him?
species,
Oh, okay.
and just see what we can do.
I totally agree. I get some comments sometimes on some of my quantum videos. People just obviously they just reject it before they try to understand it. And my comment always is that the first step of science is observation. That's how everything ever started. I mean, the first caveman that saw lightning strike a tree and some kind of yellow thing shooting out of the branch walked over to it. That was an observation that led to the discovery of fire. It's science. It starts with observation. So that's what I'm trying to do. It's just tinker and observe, and then kind of drill down from there. But it's pretty amazing. And just since you're talking about that, I want to segue over to a comment that you made when you were talking to Luke Story about this your product called Biocharge Resistor, and how you were using lasers to kind of quantumly charge this product. So that's kind of a segue between what Leela Q is doing, because it's quantum energy, but you were doing quote quantum charging. I mean, and then you were talking to Dave Asprey, who was kind of giving you a hard time about using the word quantum.
Yeah,
But you were saying, yeah, I'm using lasers. So I mean, what do you mean when you were using lasers and things to charge the product? Could you?
well, okay.
I'd
So
like to understand that. Yeah.
the first thing is to say that there's, and obviously I'm doing my job and trying to push the bounds, so my understanding is different now than it was 9 months ago.
Oh, okay.
When I was talking to Dave Asprey, and even a little bit more thorough than it was when I was talking to Luke Story. And the issue there is, we're both calling something quantum because it's in a spectra that hasn't really been identified. In the case of mine, it's more identifiable because it's something tangible, and I can actually tell you what the frequency is numerically that I'm pulsing things at and what I'm trying to do. With the quantum from, say, Leela Q, it's different. It's actually the quantum that I've been focusing on more lately, because I think it's more impactful and profound. But it, as of yet, still different than what I was doing using the lasers and the pulse frequencies. So the whole scoop with the lasers was really, are you familiar with holographic plates?
Slightly.
Okay, so basically, if you look at a holographic plate, you shine a light through it, and everybody's probably seen one. You know, it contains an image inside the plate. And the interesting thing about a hologram is that if you crack that glass plate, every small component of it contains all of the information for the entire image that was stored, down to a molecular level. And now, if you just shine a light through it, like most people do, you get the imagery created with a pretty fair degree of resolution. But if you shine coherent light through it from another laser, you actually get a perfect representation of what was captured in that glass sheet down to photonic scale. So you get actual subatomic resolution when you shine coherent light back through it. So when I was working on developing resistor, my goal there was to come up with a way to replace autohemotherapy, which is where you pull your blood and then you inject ozone into it. And then ozone is about the third most reactive molecular species. So what happens is, in a matter of seconds, literally, because there are 100 million molecular interactions with ozone a second, it's basically you're just stripping electrons as rapidly as you can. And since electrons whiz around at the speed of light, it's a pretty quick interaction. So after a few seconds, the ozone is all gone. It has interacted with the lipids in the membranes and has formed these things called stabilized ozonides. And the ozonides are signaling molecules that go in, and they have an unstable oxygen kicked off on the side. So it's more stable than ozone by a great degree, but it's less stable than your standard molecule. And so it goes in and it sets up signaling cascades. And that has a whole bunch of downstream effects, like upregulating your mitochondrial function. And you can actually feel it because it flushes you out in terms of temperature. So that was my goal with that whole project. But I didn't know that it would actually be doable in the normal sense, because I had tried lots of ozonated oils and it didn't work. They had an effect, but they didn't have nearly as pronounced an effect as I was looking for. So then I went back and started looking at the original research, and Tesla had done the original ozonated oil. And he, in lieu of how everyone has done it for the past 100 years, since he came up with the concept 120 years ago, he had this whole thing set up with magnetic field beds, and he would fill it with oil, and then he would slowly bubble ozone through the oil while they were under the influence of these magnetic field beds. And nowadays, everyone who produces it takes 2.5 weeks or so to produce their ozonated oil, just by bubbling ozone through the oil and running it through with a Venturi over and over until it's done a full, triple redox reaction. Basically, you keep reducing it until you can't reduce it anymore. And so that's actually why people question me about using a polyunsaturated fatty acid. It no longer is that at the end of the process, so it ceases to be a PUFA. But regardless, so his process, Tesla's process, took 8 weeks. And when I first looked at that, I thought, Tesla was a smart guy. There is no way in the world he was trying to waste money and time. What was he doing? So it dawned on me after just kind of musing on it for a little bit that in his infinite wisdom, he had realized that he was creating polar molecules, and you could orient the polar molecules,
right,
basically make everybody pack up single file and get something that was much, 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 much stronger than everyone else's oil, because theirs was, still viscous and rolling around. And as his, increased in its solidity, because it almost turns to a gel, it starts to solidify and doesn't move around, but it's already ordered in such a way that you've minimized the amount of molecular interactions where the ozonides clink together, and then the oxygens that are unstable move off in the form of a stabilized O2. Yeah. So I thought, Jesus, this guy's sharp. He must have felt somewhat lonely back in the early 1900s, because I'm sure he was probably the only guy that got it. So anyway, so I thought, well, okay, I can do that. So that was an easy thing to mimic. But then I thought, I've got about 100 years of tech that Tesla didn't have, some of which he actually theorized, but, I actually have it in my lab. So I started looking at ways to amp things up. And so I amped up the process of how it was functioning. And then I thought, well, the spin states are going to drop. Basically, I was trying to lock in the energy, and this is how it relates to the holographic plates. So what I did was I used lasers to basically turn the gel, after I had stabilized the gel, I used lasers to lock in the enhanced spin state that they were in, so that they wouldn't drop out as readily. And so it's you basically you set up a reference beam and an incidence beam, and when they splash together, they hit everything and it binds that reference pattern in. So you've got an interactive waveform that's encoded into the media. So you're using the gel as a sort of storage medium, just like they do with glass, because neither of them is actually a solid. You know, glass is an amorphous solid. It's not crystalline. So if you look at a different time scale, it's actually falling towards the bottom of, say, a window, as if it were just a sheet of, soap bubbles. It actually drops down with the expression of gravity on it over time, which is why in, churches that are 1,000 years old, you have stained glass windows where the bottom of the stained glass is substantially thicker than the top, because it is literally falling down like a soap bubble. So I just looked at the speed of the lasers in comparison to the speed of glass becoming completely amorphous and dropping down versus a gel doing the same thing, and realized that the disparity between the lasers and the other two was far greater. So I should be able to mimic that. So I used the gel as a holographic media and entrained it and locked it in just the same way you would with a holographic plate.
Wow. I totally got what you just said, but I had to think really hard while you were talking. It's amazing.
Well, I mean, to be fair, it took me a bit, man. I mean, it really did. It took me a couple of months.
Yeah, I mean, just think about it. 120 years ago, Tesla was messing around with molecular bond angles and not even knowing that he was doing that. He was just thinking magnetic charging, probably. Or did you?
Here's the thing. I think he did
bonds.
Understand it.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, I do.
Wow.
I really do. When I'm sure you've seen this quote, someone asked Einstein, what's it like to be the most intelligent man in the world? And he said, I wouldn't know. You'll have to ask Nikola Tesla.
Yeah, I read that. God. What's amazing, right? Philip, you gotta agree with me on this one, but I can't, the way that Ian's brain works, right? I mean, just listening to you, Ian, just blows my head. I mean, but this is the same guy who goes home and his wife yells at him to take out the trash.
100% true.
Yeah, Mr. Smarty Pants, but take the damn trash.
Or to the point, chides me for not having done it before I left for the lab. So
that's ingenious. So is there any chance that the Leela quantum energy can substitute for this type of imprinting that you're doing? I mean, is it completely separate energy?
They're at different parts of the spectrum, and I always prattle on, and I know I've told both of you guys this. I'm always trying to do that Henry David Thoreau thing of being the one hacking at the branches of evil, or not. Rather, his quote was, "For every 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil, there's one hacking at the root." And so I always wanted to be the guy, hitting the real issue. And the reason I think the quantum, in terms of what Philip is doing and Roman is working on and you're working on as well, okay, I think that is more impactful, because when I assess the different space that it's coming from, that's a more fundamental issue. So you're able to send out a cascade through a larger area with more minimal effort. It's just, we're just still groping around in the dark. I mean, mine is quantifiable and I can repeat it, and which is great, for production. But it's different, it's a lower energy state. I'm looking at quantizing electron spin, and that's something that hasn't been done before, and it required me to kind of rejigger the de Broglie equation from 1924 in order to do it, because at the time those guys looked at energy states as all the energy contained within the system, and the way they were basically saying it, to break it down, was everything in between the outermost shell of the electron has a certain energy and wavelength, right? Which makes sense. But they were also looking at it as all of the energy is coming from the revolution of the electrons around the nucleus of the atom, or in an aggregate sense, the molecule. What's funny about that is it's not right. It's mostly right, but it's not completely right, because what you really need to look at is there, like everything in nature. We didn't realize it in 1924, so this isn't any skin off Roy's back. Is it, everything has rotation, right? Fermionic and bosonic spin. So everything in nature is not only moving, it's rotating. And they didn't realize that back in the day. So really what's going on is you can actually change the inherent energy in a system, not just by having things jump orbital shells when you pump energy into them. You can actually keep them in their own in orbital shell so that there's no bump out and then drop down and emission of a photon. You simply have to get the spin harmonized, because if you look at the solar system, that would be akin to saying all the power in the solar system is from the planets rotating or revolving around the sun, but it's really not. There's a tremendous amount of confined energy in the axial rotation of the planets on their own axis, because they're big, fat, spinning bodies with a lot of energy.
A lot of mass.
And yeah, and exactly, and that's the thing. So there's a tremendous amount of confined energy in that system, and the same thing applies to electrons running around a nucleus. So I was manipulating that and just came up with different ways to approach that issue, so I could enhance the potential for interaction without changing the molecular configuration. But that's an outward effect. If you really get more to the issue, you're looking at the quantum and the true quantum, which is what I'm beginning to hypothesize. Going back to my handy dandy scientific method, I had a question, now I'm hypothesizing, and my initial test data is actually starting to suss out a bit, that there is something that is more fundamental than all matter and energy, through which those things emerge. And if you can start creating effects at that level, then they propagate up. And that's my hypothesis right now as to what's happening with what we're terming, on the Leela front, quantum energy. It's something that's happening in a level that is below manifest energy and physicality. It's something that's just in a vibratory field that then cascades through. So, longest answer ever.
No, that's because because I've tried to quantify the just trying to explain it to people, and it's so hard to explain. People that understand source and source energy or consciousness, or the power of consciousness, they get it. And I kind of put it in those terms, that it's like source energy or consciousness. But I'd love to hear if you ever kind of like really theorize, because one of the most fascinating aspects of this, the Leela Q block, is that it can transfer a molecular frequency of a substance onto another object, and that other object gets imprinted on it, just like you were describing using lasers. This quantum block has that same ability, where then the second object now has a copy of the molecular frequency. That's what these boosters are. It's kind of the frequency sets at Leela. I try to explain it to people where there's only really three types of these sets, and one's etheric, right, which is created from consciousness, or it's you've got some very talented, gifted healers that are able to formulate these etheric frequencies, like the weight loss frequency, and I'm guessing that your new Forever Young frequency, right, Philip, is also one of those, and as well as your DNA and cell protection. And so those are created by healers with their consciousness. And then the stuff that I tinker with, because I'm a mere mortal, is I just deal with 3D substances, but that have molecular frequencies, because you're right, everything vibrates and rotates and spins. And so these molecular frequencies, but what I don't I can't grasp, and maybe you can explain it, Ian, is I can't wrap my head around, is like, how in the world does it work, right? Because I know it works, because I've made these boosters, and the people that try them out, if you just read the chat, people are just, it's amazing that it helps people, and it blows me away that, like, okay, it works, but how, but I'm just capturing these substances. It's like this new one, the testosterone booster, and I put it into a metal card, and now all of a sudden you carry that card. It's like you have the substance with you, or in you, and or you're exposing yourself to it. But I mean, how would you?
Are you familiar?
Yeah, I mean, how does that
work?
Are
you familiar with HAPB?
With what?
HAPB, HAPBEE.
No.
Okay, so Happy is kind of an interesting company. They have a device that you wear around your neck that does exactly what we're doing. And they've got a lot of documented clinical science for the past 20 years. And it just went public actually a couple months ago. And Scott, the CEO, is a friend of mine, and they are doing really neat stuff. He's a real sharp guy, and they've got some interesting tech, and they're taking frequencies and locking it in and recreating those frequencies and getting the same effects. You know, like you can lock in nicotine and produce the effect of nicotine, or lock in CBD. Say the same thing. I think a lot of people are tending in that direction right now. And what you were asking, Kay, and in terms of can I explain it? Yeah, at this point, I actually can. Quick digression, or perhaps not so quick. Your comment about source energy and consciousness. So there's a fellow that I've worked with for a couple of years named Barry Morgulin. He's a surgeon trained at UCLA, endoscopic surgeon, used to go all over the world training people for endoscopic surgery. And he's a really interesting guy, very sharp, good MD. But his real gig these days is he runs a thing called Energy for Success. And they work on source energy. So he's the only Westerner who's ever become a grandmaster of this, ancient energy tradition that he learned in China over the span of 25 years when he was traveling there to teach people in Chinese hospitals how to do endoscopic surgery. He would go there and teach, and then go into the mountains and trained at a monastery in the mountains for 25 years. And he's kind of an interesting guy. But he's, a grandmaster of this stuff. And right after we first met, the thing that actually enabled me to reframe my appreciation of what was happening with the molecular structure in terms of its energy density was he put his hand over. He had a guy. We were at PaleoFX. The guy ripped open a packet of protein powder and scooched it into two separate piles. And Dr. B walked over and just put his hand over one of the piles for just a couple seconds, and then said, "Ian, taste them." And I was standing right there, no sleight of hand or anything. It was just, he just held his hand above it, no close contact. And I tasted the two piles. One tasted like normal protein powder, and then the one that he put his hand over tasted incredibly different. No bitter taste, no weird chemical aftertaste. It was good. And it kind of flummoxed me. I said, "What did you do?" And he said, "Well, I charged it with source energy." And as a scientist, I went, "What? What does that mean?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, you don't actually think all of the receptors you have to discern whether something is beneficial for you are just physical, do you?" And, kind of going back to the whole lock and key mechanism of sensory input, which actually is, as we speak, kind of being debunked, because people are realizing that it's actually a quantum biology function where it has to do with vibration. And there's a book called Life on the Edge by Jim Al-Khalil that's really kind of goes in depth on the quantum biology front right now. And it's very well researched. And if you follow the thought progression behind how they've done some of the experiments to suss out that, it's not a lock and key mechanism for, say, olfactory input, it's actually a vibratory mechanism of sensory, then it starts to make more sense. But when he did that, it kind of threw me, because I looked at it and there was no change in temperature, there was no change in color. So that rules out a whole host of different types of molecular interactions. And so it stuck in the back of my head, like, what the heck does that mean? Source energy, charged it with source energy. And what I came to figure out is, initially my first blush at it was it's a quantization of the electron spin. That's what I thought. Actually, as I've moved through it farther over the past 9 months, continuing to try and better my understanding of it, I've realized that that's actually more aligning with what Roman and Philipp are doing, in that it's actually an even more subtle vibration than I was thinking of. So it's not necessarily such a gross thing, gross meaning in the material plane. It's more of a vibratory function. And so that's kind of the setup for the quick answer. The quick answer is nothing solid. Matter isn't actually matter. It's almost entirely space, like 99.999% space. And if you put a pin in the yard and you walked out 30 feet and put another pin down and then drew that in a circle, so you had a 60-foot diameter, that's generally speaking the distance between the nucleus of an atom and the first orbital shell. And that's a lot of space, and that's literally that's the relative scale. So we're not actually solid in the way we think we are. So what does that really mean? If you've got little things that are running around in a circle at the speed of light that are there part of the time and not there part of the time, well, what it really means is something else is holding it together, right? It's some sort of electron interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And to my conception now, it's an electron interaction with an overarching field, a sort of mental or consciousness field that actually holds it together. Now, I haven't completely proven that out yet, but that's my hypothesis, and that's what the data seems to be showing so far. So, just being completely honest with it, I can't say it definitively yet. I can tell you intuitively it sure feels right. But that's what I'm trying to prove out, is that it's a wave function. So whether you have something that operates at a level like happy, where it's creating an EMF pulse at a certain frequency that's a copy of a molecular pulse from, say, nicotine or caffeine, or whether you're doing something at the quantum level, like charging a card with the quantum frequencies, as is arrived at by somebody who can tap in intuitively to that field and then do that, a la Roman, you're getting the same effect because you're acting on something that's not actually static. It's vibratory in nature, and everything is just interacting patterns of waves and varying levels of complexity. And we're still nudging it to ripple at a level that's below what we have looked at before. So, and that's why I say, I'm nudging it at one level, but when you go a little bit farther, you hit that source energy quantum field level. So
yeah, no,
yeah.
So Philip, you agree?
Well, I think it's fascinating, and that's what what I'm very interested in and hearing more about in general is, this Ian's take and other people's takes that can phrase it in a similar way, have the scientific understanding that Ian has, and then looking at this and trying to break it down from that perspective, because that's surely something I cannot do, because I'm just not a scientist. I can look at it from an energetic perspective, and often that's really what we're trying to do, right? Science is trying to play catch up, and all of what Ian just said intuitively to me also feels exactly how I see it. And yeah, I'm curious when you can go even a little deeper or to the next level, and then say, okay, now I got it, and this is exactly how it works.
Yeah.
The one thing about this, guys, and this is kind of an odd thing, is sometimes I feel like the 1,000-part machine trying to grasp an awareness of the billion-part machine. I am actually beginning to think that I'll be able to take pot shots at it and do secondary effect studies, but I don't know that we're actually going to arrive at being able to verbally or mathematically demonstrate something that is far below the level of, manifest creation, which really, in truth, is kind of what I'm looking at. It's you have to, I think, beyond a certain point, your intellect has to just get put on a shelf, and you have to realize there's a certain degree of, universality or divinity that's really coming into play here, and I can do a pretty good shot at, quantifying this stuff and making it understandable, but it's like looking at a miracle. I can break down a lot of things that would be considered miraculous, and they're not really miraculous. They're just how this place works, right? The universe that we're in, it's just how it was built. We just haven't gotten far enough down the berry path to read that far into the rule book.
Yeah.
And and that's, as a scientist, that's what I'm trying to do, is push it forward. The other thing of note, with reference to the hologram, that's kind of an intriguing thing, and that I think is worthy of being aware, is, like any other thing that's holographic in nature, if you're dealing with things that are interactive waveforms all the time, then there's a permanent record of every interaction. So that being said, mind your P's and Q's, be kind, because it's all going down there. And, it is, in a sense, it's a perfect journal of everything that's ever happened, is definitively stored out in a vibratory interaction. And that I can demonstrably say.
Yeah, karma. Hey, I know I know you have a hard stop because you both got meetings here in about 15 minutes. So I do want to hit on a couple of high notes before we drop. One of the things, and thank you for that explanation. And I wish we had so much more time. I've got so many questions, but I want to hit on these things. So now this new product that you've got, Ian, called the Biocharge Resistor. You and I had chatted on SMS text about my reaction. It seems like I had a detox reaction to it. And so I just wanted to put that out there. And if you could explain what you told me, which was, how to dilute it, because, this stuff, I thought that one tiny little capsule was nothing. And you were kind of like joking with I think Dave Asprey about, or Luke, about don't take three, or just take one. And so I just took one, and it affected my sleep. I broke out in eczema. But then you were telling me that, there's so much positive feedback, and that I probably had a herx. And so,
Yeah.
could you kind of, so that for anyone else that tries it, if you pull a herx, dilute it, right? So you want to go ahead and just make sure people know?
It's well, it is. It's what I was shooting for was to replace autohemotherapy, and which is a pretty intense therapeutic regime. When you have your blood pulled and mix it and then re-inject it. And yeah, sometimes people do have a reaction where if there's some toxins in their system, and there are two that I've noticed at this point that seemingly come about, is you can get the capsules to go all the way down the GI tract because they're in a delayed release capsule, and end up in the small intestine where it gets kind of systemically dropped and the ozonides move more throughout your body. Or it, if taken with food, can occasionally open up in your stomach and in the area, where it's exposed to a lot of, say, candida or something like that, and it will eviscerate that stuff very rapidly. And the problem there is when you have a massive die-off of something like that, it will trigger a detox sort of reaction where you start to have a Herxheimer, because there are too many toxins going into your system for you to process. So, what I tell people if they're having that, or they're concerned that they might have something like that, is take it with activated charcoal, binders. Okay. And if need be, break it down and dilute it. You can crack open the capsule and just take half of it with a little bit of extra oil or something like that. For those of you who are tinkers, or just take a load of activated charcoal. And, there's some really good binders. Quicksilver makes a really good binder. It's crocheted stuff, works really well. And just search out some really good binders so you don't have those kind of reactions. It's not hard to work around, but what it does tell you is that there's definitively something that is in your body that's not really ACEs and not so beneficial for you. Because when you're balanced and you take that stuff, really all you feel is kind of a flooding of a little bit of heat, and that's just from the upregulation in the mitochondria. And so you feel that extra pop of mitochondrial upregulation as a little flooding of heat.
Oh yeah, I must be more messed up than I think. So yeah, this little word here on the label, when it says advanced detox, they mean it.
Yeah, well, it's a funny thing because you're trying to make something. I really was trying to make something that would have a definitive impact, because I had taken a lot of little 300 milligram capsules from other companies that were doing oils, and they just didn't pack a punch. The problem is sometimes packing a punch is great if your system's in a good area, but if you're really far from equilibrium, sometimes not so cool.
Yeah, no, I just that's the thing. I take a lot of different. I'm tinkering and trying supplements all the time, and so yeah, I had no idea. This one was like one of those ones that really threw me. So yeah, word to the wise, take it slow, dilute it on this one, but it works, and yeah, you'll see the results. So now before we drop off, I definitely want to touch on, and I want to thank you. I got mine last night. So there's this brand new product also by Ian that I just received it last night. I just tried it this morning, called the Neural RX, right? And so I want to make sure you mention this, and like, when is it going to go on sale? And then could you talk a little bit about it? Because I'd actually done a video on C60 with MCT oil, so I'm very familiar with the you using caprylic acid, but then you've actually added additional supplements. So could you talk about this new product, and especially like because it looks awesome. I mean, I got it the minute I read the label. I'm like, okay, this is gonna be so good, because this is gonna be a really good one for
Yeah, it's
for
a
amping up your
nootropic.
brain. So yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
that's it.
What's this all about, and when is it gonna be available?
It'll probably be available in a month or so, maybe sooner. But it's just a nootropic, and it's what I take personally. It was the best thing that I could come up with that elicited the strongest response, and so I wanted to do a couple of things and upregulate the pace at which I was pumping out new neurons, and it does that. So it's kind of interesting because the product is cool, but what you really have to do when you take it is you have to find new things to stimulate your brain in directions that you haven't been stimulated before, because neurons are incredibly consumptive in terms of oxygen and just general resources for energy. So your body prunes them synaptically, and it won't keep them, because they really are a drain. Your brain accounts for between 2 and 3% of your body mass and sucks up 20% of your oxygen. So it's kind of a difficult situation. But it kicks out new neurons, but you want to cement them in place. So I do a ridiculous number of things after I go through a course of taking it. On about the third week, when I'm really at the apex of when new neurons start getting pumped out, I will start doing some sort of brain training that I haven't done before. Like the most recent, and Philip, you'll appreciate this, was trying to learn raps in German, because I had never done anything remotely like that. So,
Wait. Did you just say you're trying to learn how
yeah,
to rap in German?
that's exactly right. I started learning how to rap in German.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because I
Oh
don't
my
speak
God.
German, and it was something that was entirely different, and truly entirely different. Yeah, and I do mental puzzles every day and things like that, just to keep my acuity on the uptick. Because if it's like anything else, if you don't use it, you lose it. Your body's incredibly efficient, and it's always trying to optimize homeostasis. And the way it does that is by dropping off things that are inefficient. And generally speaking, neurons are painfully inefficient because they suck up so much oxygen. So unless you have a need for them, it prunes them. So what I do is I find oddball things that can cement them into place, so that I'm just getting smarter and smarter and smarter and smarter by having a larger engine to push through things with. And it really does make a difference. I mean, the rapidity with which I can learn things now is fundamentally different than it used to be a decade ago. I'm a better organism, at least in that capacity. I don't know that is a capacity in terms of going for a sprint, because I run out of oxygen a lot more rapidly. But in terms of just cognitive function, yeah, I'm aces compared to where I was a decade ago, and a lot of it has to do with stuff like this, taking things that stimulate neuronal growth and also upregulate ATP production, just all of the sorts of things that you'd want to be hitting on to just really boost your mental function.
No, right on. I'm so on top of this. I mean, I'm a massive biohacker, and I love this stuff. So, hey, everyone, in about a month, this is going to go on sale. It's Iron Secret Brain Juice, and in 3 weeks, I got to learn how to rap in German. So,
Yeah, there you go. That's what this really is all about.
I want a recording, please.
It's just FYI, Philip, it was Cedo, Bilderheim Kampf was the first one.
Oh, okay.
wow. Okay. So yeah, I'm gonna definitely give it a try. Not the German rap, but I'm gonna do this and come up with something. But awesome. This is Iron Secret Brain Juice, everybody. Yeah, this is cool. I was actually working on my own, but we don't have time to get into that. Hey, we are hitting that dead stop. I know you guys got other meetings, so I just kind of want to. Oh, I hate wrapping it up. There's so many things I want to ask, but I just want to say thank you. Thank you for everyone listening in and just participating in our conversation. This is fascinating. I mean, these two guys are just amazing. And eventually, next time we talk, I really want to hear more about like what the two of you are doing together, because that just is just amazing to me. So just before we wrap up, though, I want to just for anyone who's interested in getting a hold of Ian and following him. So I do know that Wizard Sciences, you have a URL right now called Mitchell Sciences, but you're actually going to come up with a new one, right? Are you going to come up with a new website called Wizard Scientist? Because the URL
Yep.
now is Mitchell.
That's the one. Yeah.
Okay. And so this is and it's coming soon. And then, of course, you've got Leela C60 from Philip. If you want to get a hold of him there, all the links will be in the video description below. The Leela Quantum Tech website link will be in the description below. And then, of course, I didn't get a chance to even mention this, but there's a third thing that Philip does. It's called the Path of Love, and that is an awesome business venture as well. And so in order to get a hold of Philip, just any one of these websites, all the links below. We've also got the Tinkers Academy. That's how you get a hold of me, at tinkers.academy in your URL window, and that comes to my blog, and all of this stuff will be on the blog. And just want to say thanks, guys. This has been a great discussion. I love the way your guys' brains work, and I think all these new products are going to be really, really cool. So, wow, thanks. Any
Thanks,
parting words, Ian?
No, be kind. Much love. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, watch. The consciousness is everything, right, Philip?
Yeah, it is.
I would agree. Thanks so much for having us, Kev. That was amazing, and it's a pleasure to speak with the two of you. It's fun, and it sparks even new ideas, and it feels like we're all like trying to do great things, and in between there's like a little touch base when we talk about it, and yeah, it's just great to share. And yeah, thank you also to everybody listening, and yeah, just hope that everybody gets through these times in a phenomenal way, because it truly carries some opportunities that may be still hidden a little bit, but yeah, the time definitely carries that.
All right. So thank you very much, and have a great day. Aloha, everyone.